Kenyon Sadiq might be the tight end one drafted, but I'm not certain that he is the best tight end in the 2026 NFL class. We are going to dive deep into that 2026 NFL tight end draft class, and we're going to find out, is there anyone better than Sadiq? What I've got pulled up for you here is the slap model for 2026. We've got Sadiq, Stowers, Max Clar, Justin Jolly, Michael Trigg. You might be asking yourself, Davis, what is the slot model? Well, as I've been talking about in all these videos, it is the statistical likelihood of achieving production model. It's actually a pretty simple draft model in which we input collegiate statistics, draft capital, and combine. We're not at the combine yet. This is projected combine stuff. Nerdy. You don't need to worry about it. This will be updated after the NFL draft, but it's pretty simple. Draft capital is going to be the biggest part, which is why Kenyon Sadiq is still the number one tight end. He's the only tight end in the class who is expected to be a first round pick. Honestly, maybe the only tight end who is going to be a first round pick. Then we have got targets per route run and yards per route run as part of the model, which is very simple. If you never heard of targets per route run or yards per route run, it's basically how often does a guy get targeted when he's on the field, and how often do his targets turn into yards, which is basically what we want to be having happen, right? This is all actually very simple. And one of the very interesting things I found when diving into the slot model was actually the highest signal you get for tight ends is not targets per route run. It's not yards per route run. It's actually just receptions, which is, if you think about it, makes sense for tight ends because for fantasy, the hard part for us to tell is what is the difference between Darnell Washington and his collegiate numbers or Drew Sample. Remember when Drew Sample was a third round pick to the Bengals and he's only ever blocked for them? We need to find the difference between a Mark Andrews going in the third round to the Baltimore Ravens or Drew Sample going into the third round for the Cincinnati Bengals. And receptions per team pass attempt is actually the easiest way to do this because it basically tells us very simple. Is this player a receiving tight end or is this player a blocking tight end? One of the questions I've gotten from some guys in the Discord is actually, does run blocking grade end up correlating at all? I could not find any correlation between PFF run blocking grade and fantasy point production at the next level. Doesn't mean it's not there, but I was not able to find it. What we are looking at right now is this class and yards per route run. So the 26 tight end draft class sorted by yards per route run. You might notice on your screen, you're not seeing Kenyon Sadiq all the way down at 19th in this class in yards per route run amongst tight ends behind Jaron Kainick and Justin Jolly and Landon King. Looking at his comps over in the RotoViz Box Score Scout Simulator, you do have some guys who are relevant for fantasy. Kyle Rudolph, Cole Kmet, Jermaine Gresham. You also have some of the biggest busts at the position. Luke Schoonmaker, Hayden Hurst, CJ Fedorowicz. A lot of you guys are probably too young to remember CJ Fedorowicz. But Kenyon Sadiq is the tight end one of this class. But I don't think it's clickbait to say that he's kind of a fake tight end one because I would expect him to probably be a little bit worse for fantasy than your average first round pick. He had a 19% targets per route run, a 1.6 yards per route run. It's just not a particularly great profile. Guys who I am very excited about, well, let's go back up here to the top. Eli Stowers, the MF and Mackey Award winner, 2.55 yards per route run, ran 301 routes, which is a pretty healthy number for a team that did not have a high dropback rate. Eli Stowers was very productive at Vanderbilt for a team that ran the ball a ton. 85 targets. His team did not drop back a ton, which I think is pretty relevant to this conversation. Stowers is actually a converted quarterback recruit. He went to Texas A&M as a quarterback, but I think that basically this is the cleanest this guy earns the ball profile, right? So we had the 2.5 yards per route run with a 28% targets per route run, a PFF pass route grade of 85.3. And if you look at his comps, not weighted by draft capital, you've got Jason Morrow, Hunter Henry. Then you have some more busts of this profile, which I would definitely include Gavin Escobar. If you've been playing fantasy football for a long time, you definitely remember him. You also have the Hayden Hurst guys show up, which is kind of an interesting thing. You do see lots of guys like this show up time and time again with the tight end skill set because basically there are only so many highly drafted tight ends. But Stowers is a guy I like a lot more than draft capital. because this is incredibly fantasy friendly usage. Over 2/3 of his snaps came from the slot. He had a very strong route grade and a super high targets per route run. So, what that tells me is if Stowers is in fact drafted in the second round, which is what his mock draft database draft capital is, if that happens, he is going to be drafted by a team who wants to use him for fantasy, which is also true of Sadiq. But I think this is basically a way to arbitrage his performance. Now, going back in, next up, we have Michael Trigg, who is pretty high up there in the slap model. Trigg ended up with a much higher average depth of target. You can see in his portfolio here 11.3 A dot with 2.18 yards per route run. The issue with Trigg is he is a little bit older of a prospect. So he started college in 2021. He started at USC, transferred to Ole Miss, transferred to Baylor, didn't get to peak dominator rating in a full season until the very end of his career. However, he did generate 6 touchdowns. And I will say the film guys really like Trigg. I would say that is one of the biggest differences is that he is basically, if you want a good comp for Michael Trigg, I would actually say Terrence Ferguson is not a bad comp where he has the higher average depth of target while also earning targets at 26% targets per route run. It's an abnormal profile of a guy in the NFL, but like vertical slot tight end with the NFL playing more 13 personnel, wanting bigger guys out there to counter smaller defensive backs, teams using nickel as their base. Some teams are even using dime quite a ton. That is very interesting to me, basically. So I'm not out on Trigg in any way, shape, or form. I would say that these are basically fourth round rookie picks, but Trigg, again, if he does get drafted, and Trigg ends up being a third round pick, I think we are going to be pretty in on him. One of the guys that the slap model likes the most is Tanner Koziol, who is a guy that honestly I forgot existed until I ran numbers in the slap model. He earned 94 targets, which I'm guessing, I thought that would be correct, that it was almost the most targets earned of any tight end in this class. He ran a route on 322 passing plays, 322 dropbacks. He stayed in the block on the other 100 of those. His yards per route run, again, very strong, fifth best in this class. Now, he had a much lower A dot because he is the portfolio of another style of tight end that we actually like, which is the reception tight end, the possession tight end. And that is actually, again, these are valuable guys. You think about sort of a Jake Ferguson style. If you wanted to make a totally crazy comp for him, I think you could actually go for his former MAC brethren, and you could go Harold Fannin Jr. Harold Fannin played at, of course, Bowling Green State University, but Koziol transferred from Ball State to Houston with 94 receptions, 839 yards, 8 touchdowns, and a 30% dominator rating, then transferred to Houston and had a 24% dominator rating. Fannin got really good draft capital. I'm not expecting Koziol to get that truly good draft capital. However, if he does, I would say that this would be a guy I would be willing to spend a third round dynasty rookie pick on. I'm also thinking that he will probably have a pretty strong combine. I really like Koziel. He had a super low drop rate. He actually ran a 37% of his routes inline, so he's not just like a pure slot guy. But he, to me, is going to be a priority sort of later pick. And then running through some of the other names here, a guy I especially wanted to highlight was Justin Jolly, who was a guy who just sadly had a weird college career because his quarterbacks kept getting injured. He transferred from UConn to NC State when Grayson McCall did, but Grayson McCall got injured, and NC State, around the time Casey Concepcion was there, basically had to change the base of their offense, but super productive, right? 33% dominator rating as a true freshman, 23%. So a 23% dominator rating, racked up 166 receptions, did so with a 25% targets per route run, 1.7 yards per route run. Again, not nearly as good. So he's actually a little bit closer to Sadiq, but he basically was like 50-50 in terms of his slot versus inline, and he had a really good PFF route grade. So to me, Justin Jolly, if I was an NFL team, so if I was Kansas City Chiefs, if I was the Dallas Cowboys, if I was a team that wanted a tight end, to me, he would basically be the top guy that I would want. In terms of what a day 3 tight end, this is what a day 3 tight end looks like. So we had a 71% pass blocking grade. I actually just don't even know this, but let's go look at his run blocking grades. So they were actually not great, but he did generate a ton of run blocking snaps. So over his career, he did 666 run blocking snaps. I wouldn't say he was particularly great at them, but I would say he's basically fine. But that is just, again, going to be the portfolio of one of the guys that I really like. Running through a couple of these other guys, we have Eli Raridan from Notre Dame. He's for sure going to be a day 3 guy. His yards per route run of 2.2 was really strong. He just did not run a ton of routes, and he definitely was not what you would call a target earner. Then we've got Oscar Delp, who is basically, I could call him Darnell Washington at point 2. 73% of his snaps came inline. He had a 13% targets per route run. I would say this would be an example of a guy where the draft capital actually gets in the way, where the draft capital is showing you if a team does take Oscar Delp pretty high, it's actually telling you the opposite. It would be the Drew Sample thing, where he just does not earn any targets. The guy was in college for 4 seasons and had 94 targets. Not a guy that you would want to be drafting. Then you've got Dallin Bentley from Utah, who had a 2 yards per route run. He is basically just one of these anonymous guys. I have not yet mentioned Max Clark, who is sitting there at 3 on the list. And the reason why is I just have a very hard time with guys like Max Clark, where what do you actually make of this portfolio of guy? He had a 31% dominator rating at Purdue, but again, this is a very low team pass attempt. So he had 2 yards per team pass attempt there, but then he goes to Ohio State, and theoretically, if you think about it, Max Clark is going to be playing with other really good players in the NFL. It's going to be like being at Ohio State. There's going to be a Jeremiah Smith, a Carnell Tate, a Trevion Henderson, I guess a CJ Donaldson from his final season. And he had a 10% dominator rating. He just does not really look that good in his stuff. But in the slap model, basically is telling you it's all draft capital with Clark. We can't really make heads or tails of his production. Jack Endries, again, looks pretty good because of the draft capital, but he had a 1.06 yards per route run, super high inline rate. He is a blocker. Then again, final guy, we have got Joe Royer there at the bottom. These guys are just whatever, not really guys you'd be interested in fantasy. So this is how this draft class stacks up. Kenyon Sadiq is the premium bet, but to me, I probably am going to have other people in the market be higher on Kenyon Sadiq, where I'm probably going to be dipping into that Casey Concepcion tier 2 of wide receiver ahead of Sadiq. The target earning profiles to chase if the day 2 draft capital happens are Eli Stowers, Tanner Koziol, and Michael Trigg. And then the bucket of guys on day 3 that I'm really excited about where they roll, or where their role would be, where they land, is going to be Justin Jolly and Dallin Bentley. But basically, the story is always this with tight ends. 1, they take a long time to develop, and 2, draft capital and depth chart where they land is going to be more important even than running back at wide receiver. But that is a clear look at the 2026 tight end draft class. Make sure that you like this video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel for more. And if you're interested in the slap model, head on over to patreon.com/Mattek and you can download it yourself.